Here we go. Another dive into the critical journey stages in the life of faith. I've heard from a couple of you that you got the book. Way to go! You don't need the book to be in this study, and I'm going to end up doing this differently than I normally like to. I think I'm going to refer to the book quite a bit, and maybe even have my nose in it because I want to get this right for you. Because this is a theory of human experience. And when they say faith, they're coming to this theory of stages of faith with the assumption that there is a God. And spirituality from their perspective includes a God, and a God who specifically is at work in our lives and sees us with unconditional love and treats us that way, and has a desire for us to grow in our awareness of God's love for us, and that we've been created uniquely to live in this relationship with God and to live in a unique way in the world. So that's their perspective, that there is a God, it's a God of unconditional love in relationship with us to bring forth the most life in us and in the world. I like that perspective. This theory can also be used for people who aren't necessarily Christian. It can be used in different faiths. It can be used in something like Alcoholics Anonymous that has a spirituality and believes in a higher power. But the key of this theory, this stage theory, is that the God of this book is a God of love and forgiveness and not as much judgment as we sometimes think God has. It's really about grace and love and encouragement to grow. I handed this out last week. This is, again, the picture of the stages of faith. Today we're going to go through stage 1. Next week I plan to talk about stage 2 and stage 3. And then the following week, I think we'll talk about stage 4 and the experience of the wall. The next week, we'll talk about 5 and 6, and then I think we'll have time to reflect on the entire thing. This, for me, is a description of two things. It shows what it's like to be a human being in relationship with God. So it describes what a lifelong relationship with God is like. I have a really cool definition of faith that I want to share with you. Their perspective of faith is, with faith, it's a journey and it's a process by which we let God direct our lives or let God be God. And it's a continual process of growth rather than a point of arrival. So faith is a continual process of growth rather than a point of arrival. So that means we will continue to grow and change throughout every stage of our life. I think it could be argued that even in the next life, we'll continue to develop and grow. That's the promise of the resurrection and the everlasting life. I have no clue what that looks like, but I do believe that there is still a kind of dynamic experience of life after death. So this is, faith is a verb, it's a relationship, it's a way of letting God direct our lives, but also that we have some responsibility and we have the chance to take some initiative in our life with God. Okay. The second part of this stage that I really like, we can learn about what it's like for human beings to be in relationship with God, and if we're interested, we can use it as a tool for self-reflection. And we can use it as a way to just wonder, where am I in the journey of faith? What is my relationship with God like? Am I growing? Am I stuck? Am I in the midst of a transition between one stage to the next? Am I sitting at the wall and I've been here for 10 years, which is a possibility? It's really a tool for self-reflection as well as learning about what stages of faith is like. You do what you want to do. I'm not going to force you to do any self-reflection. That's up to you. At the end of our time, though, I am going to lead us through a prayer practice that is a part of stage 1. And we're going to just listen to a story of Jesus healing the woman who's been hemorrhaging for 12 years. And I'll invite you to just imagine yourself in it as an experience of stage 1. Okay, any questions before I dive into stage 1 and the characteristics of it? Okay, please feel free to interrupt me, ask any questions if you need clarification or something comes to your mind, or if you have a thought you just feel compelled to share. All is welcome. I appreciate the interaction. Don't hesitate to raise your hand and let me know you have something you want to ask or say. Okay, characteristics of stage 1. The first thing we need to know about this first stage of faith is that it is a recognition of God. So stage 1, the main characteristic is that we have an awareness that there is a God. This can happen in childhood. It can also happen in adulthood. It might be something that we return to regularly. I know that that happens to me when I'm, for example, out in the morning and the sunrise is beautiful. You know, when you see that pink sky and it just is perfect, there is a God. That's what it feels like to have a recognition of God or to have that sense of awe. Oh my gosh, I think there is a God, and I'm experiencing that God right now. Here are some examples of people who are experiencing life in this recognition of God. This is a child. The mom says, "I'm so glad your infection went away. Did you snuggle your Care Bear up close to your heart?" And the 4-year-old says, "No, I have Jesus close to my heart." So that is an example of a young child having an awareness that God is present in what they're going through. Standing on the mountain, looking out at the other sharply defined snow-covered peaks and the purple hues of the valley below and the azure blue sky above, I sense God's reality so much that I can't imagine anyone not believing in a creator of it all. When we stand in this beautiful landscape, we can't imagine that someone wouldn't think there's a God. It's just that overwhelming sense of awe and a recognition there's something bigger than me. And I feel it right now. Another example, going through treatment for my chemical dependency was the first time I ever acknowledged that there is a power beyond me and that I am in need of daily assistance. Alcoholics Anonymous is my experience of spirituality. So going through something in which you have a need and then feeling as though that need is recognized and met, like how people experience it in treatment, knowing that there is some higher power that can help you through a struggle is another example of a recognition of God or an awareness that God is a part of your life. And finally, I really like this one. When I saw the earth from out in space, I knew instantly that there was a God and that I needed to serve him. I like that one because it's obviously an astronaut, I think. I mean, it doesn't say who it is or what, but that for me, that really shows too that sometimes this faith, God, grace, shows up in a really unexpected place in an astronaut who's got tons of education, clearly successful, has been able to rely on him or herself throughout life, but then gets out to outer space and is like, oh, there's a God. That's an example of what stage 1 is like. Can you relate to any of those stories? Okay. So, the first characteristic, let's see, I got to find my clicker. The first characteristic of this stage is that sense of awe that those stories capture, that we have experienced when it's just we're kind of overwhelmed by beauty. We're overwhelmed by a sense that there's something bigger than us. We might even be overwhelmed by a sense of forgiveness and love. The second recognition of God or characteristic in this stage is a deep sense of need. I think it might be, I can't do this on my own. I need something bigger than me to help me through this. Then there becomes a recognition that there is a God who is present, who can help us through this life, that we're not alone. So it's a sense of need, a need to depend on, rely on something bigger than ourselves. The characteristic of a natural awareness is that you just experience God. Most often in nature. It can also be experienced when you're creating something like writing poetry, painting, where you just kind of let go of yourself and something beautiful comes out of you. So you have this natural experience of God or something greater than you. The next one is a sense of a greater meaning in life. This, I feel like, probably happens more for people in their adult life. When they become aware of God, they have a fulfillment of a longing or a desire to go deeper in their life. They want something more. They're seeking more significance for what their life means. We often hear people talking about they're searching for meaning and purpose in their life. So stage 1 becomes a place where people experience that opportunity. With an awareness of God, we have this awareness, oh, life can be more than how I've been living. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. I do want to go back to the sense of need. I think this is really important for people who are adults and are coming into the sense of God. They write, we frequently come out of a longing for a resolution to some discomfort. Alone in our pain, we feel unloved and unwanted. When God becomes real to us in this time of need, we find one who soothes us, loves us, and cares for us, and encourages us to go on living. Some of us would only consider spirituality if we were hurting in some way or had a personal need. When feeling successful or challenged in our lives, we are less likely to sense our need for God to lead us, heal us, or love us. We may be blinded to our inner needs when our outer lives are going so well. A feeling of real rejection in life may bring us to God. That's what caught my attention in that story of the astronaut. Someone who's really successful, can make it on their own, doesn't really feel that sense of need the way we do when we're going through a crisis or when the bottom falls out. Sometimes I've heard people say, and feeling kind of guilty, we don't pay attention to God when things are going well. We only turn to God when things are hard. I see heads nodding. I feel sad when people feel guilty about that. I feel like that's just a natural human way of being. And the reality is none of us are going to escape suffering, right? We can't get through this life without hard things. So there will come a time when the suffering happens, and then that will bring about a sense of, oh my gosh, I need something more than I can offer myself. So I don't think God makes bad things happens to us. It's just part of life. But the gift of grace is that God will then be there. That when we turn to God, God is always there and is here to walk with us through it all, inviting us into a deeper awareness of God's presence and God's love in our lives. And the promise of transformation. That's the story of the cross and the resurrection.
You hear stories about scientists and biologists who all of a
Yeah. Did you hear her? She said, you hear stories of scientists and biologists who, through their research, finally come to the conclusion of there's got to be a God. How else could all these insects and animals and all the nature around us come together? I think that's true for anyone who's present at a birth or has experienced a pregnancy. It just seems impossible that two cells can turn into a human being without us doing anything. That is overwhelming, that miracle of life happens just within us. We can't make it happen. It's an experience of mystery and awe. Another experience of stage one in the recognition of God. There is also in stage one a sense of innocence. It elicits a ready acceptance of anything having to do with God. We want to live in this unconditional acceptance wherever we are. The childlike faith says, God accepts and forgives me. Can't you? We believe our lives are orchestrated by God, whose perfect will promises harmony and peace for all who follow God. Enthused by a relationship with God, we try to bring out the best in others through our encouragement and our kind hearts. We trust people implicitly, especially those who share our faith. We seldom question them, nor do we notice any evil in others. We are truthful, we are loving. So in this stage, there's an innocence. There's an implicit and explicit trust that God is present, that life is good. We can trust other people, especially other people who are in the same faith as us. There's just an innocence of how could this not be? So that's a characteristic of stage one. Sense of awe, a sense of need, natural awareness, greater meaning in life, and a sense of innocence. Okay, in each of these stages, we have the possibility of getting caged in the stage. That means the stage becomes a cage rather than a place for us to grow. We get stuck. We get bogged down in an unhealthy way, and it's like we're stuck in the mud, and we can't get out. In many of these stages, when we get caged or stuck, we become obsessed with having to be right. Getting caged in a stage is a natural thing. We all go through it. Learning about it helps in our self-awareness so we can just say, oh, maybe I'm being super stubborn about being right because I'm stuck in this moment. I'm stuck in this way. And sometimes just noticing when we're stuck and we're being stubborn and needing to be right, that just noticing that can sometimes open us up to being freed from that, to continue on our journey of growth. So being caged in stage 9, each stage has a unique way of getting stuck. The characteristics of stage 1 are a sense of worthlessness, spiritual bankruptcy, martyrdom, and ignorance. The worthlessness, when we're stuck or caged in stage 1, comes out like, instead of feeling love and awe, we think of God and others as constantly having expectations of us that we cannot measure up to. We think that God and others have expectations of us that we cannot measure up to. We lose that sense of awe, that sense of unconditional love, and we think we'll never be able to meet these expectations of God and others. That is a symptom that we're caged, we're stuck. Spiritual bankruptcy is feeling personally or spiritually bankrupt. We feel that no one cares for us, certainly not God, because if God really cared, we would be rescued. So a desire to be rescued and feeling like we've been abandoned and we have nothing, we're bankrupt, that is a sign that a person in stage 1 is caged, is stuck in the mud. I think it's really also important to note this desire to be rescued, that it's really all about our dependence on God, and in stage one, we don't see the initiative we can take in our own responsibility in life, that we do have something to do in our relationship with God. The next symptom or sign of being caged at stage one is martyrdom. We feel the whole world is out to make life tough for us, to hurt us, humiliate us, to get us, and certainly not to help, love, or care for us. We carry a lot of anger and cannot deal with it. Martyrdom. I'm sure we've all felt like a martyr at times. This is a sign that we are caged at stage one. We feel like there's no one who's going to help us, no one appreciates us. We are stuck, and that we are stuck in our anger, in our resentment. We lose that sense of awe and really get stuck in this resentful place. And finally, ignorance about faith issues. God is often taken as the great heavenly magician. This can lead to caged behavior. For example, we might be doing nothing to help ourselves in a problem situation and then complain that God was not there for us. People stuck at stage one can give an impression of being very pious. In reality, we suffer greatly because we feel so disconnected from God, so afraid we cannot talk easily about our alienation. Fear of rejection from low self-esteem represents the predominant feeling in this cage. As a result of fear and self-abasement, we frequently become aggressive toward ourselves or passively aggressive towards others. The ignorance, I think, that is hard is that we have this sense of God, this sense of awe, but we don't have all the information and experience of being in a relationship with God or even being a part of a faith community to have this more nuanced understanding of who God is and how God works in the world. So the ignorance, we just don't know, then comes out again in a caged place as anger and resentment and wanting to be rescued. And if we're not rescued, we feel like God doesn't care for us. These cages are really hard to talk about. Do you feel like you understand some of it? We're just getting a glimpse, so, okay. So at each stage, they share the characteristics, and then they talk about when we get stuck. The characteristics are often when someone in the stage is flourishing, and this cage is when they're having a harder time and just can't move on to the next, when you get stuck. Okay, moving from stage one to stage two. One of the most important things about any kind of development and faith relationship is we want to move, but we can't force it. I don't know about you, but I've had moments where I've wanted to get from here to there and just make it happen, because I don't want to wait through what I have to go through and what I have to face in order to get to the next place in life. I want to just jump to it. But we can't force a movement from stage to stage. We just have to trust that God is with us. And we often use the word waiting in spiritual matters. It's an active waiting. There are some things we can do or that happen which move us from stage one to stage two. Let me say that like that. Things happen when we move from stage one to stage two. Part of it is getting to be a part of a strong group, like Word for Women. Groups like a Bible study, a congregation, an AA group, when you're surrounded by other people. You get to hear other people's experience, you feel supported. The group helps a person in stage one move from stage one to stage two. It's really important that we become a part of a group because it supports It affirms the experience of, yes, God is real, and it invites people to see there's something more to this relationship with God. Another thing that happens, the transition from stage 1 to stage 2, is you let your life take on more experience. Perhaps just acknowledging that there is indeed something worth working for is a major move toward the belonging stage, which is stage 2. There's a hint when you have this awareness of God that there's something more to experience and to live for. And being a part of the group, letting the group kind of take a person along, is that transition from an awe sense of God to being a part of a community that can form you in your relationship and understanding of God. Another helpful component that helps people move from stage 1 to stage 2 is to find a charismatic leader to follow. Outside of the church, I think of like Oprah or Brene Brown. A charismatic leader could be a pastor, it could be a church, it could be the leader of a Bible study. It can be, it's like you look toward this person and see them, and you see what could be the possibility for you. And so following that leader then takes a person from stage 1 and helps them transition into stage 2. And finally, discovering the way. For a long time, we may have been isolated and searching for the way God has in store for us to grow. Now we stumble upon a set of ideas, a belief system, or a group of people who show us the light and answer our questions. It is such a big relief and feels so safe and secure, like a haven in a storm. And for now, that is what we need. So just being a part of a group feels like I'm not alone in the search for God anymore. It's a huge relief. You get to be supported in a community in your new awareness recognition of God when you're in stage 1. Many of us grew up in the church, and faith has always been a part of our lives, right? We're baptized as babies in the Lutheran tradition. So some of us have experienced this recognition of God at a young age, and we can't even remember a time when God wasn't a part of our life. That's many people in the Lutheran tradition's experience. That too is valid. Sometimes, the stages happen in childhood, just like the 4-year-old who said, I didn't need my Care Bear, I had Jesus in my heart. So this is what's so interesting about this stage is that it can happen in early childhood. We can experience it in adulthood. It's just really a way of noticing how faith happens, spirituality happens in human beings, and then how we can develop in that faith and grow in it. Okay, there are some catalysts that we can do, and I really like this. It's accept your self-worth. These are things that if we want to move from stage 1 to stage 2, we can live into this. The movement from stage 1 to stage 2 requires an acknowledgement that we are basically worthwhile human beings and that we are loved just as we are. This means we may have to give up some spiritually self-defeating behavior and accept God's love and care. And second, sorry, I'm not good at PowerPoints. I totally forgot to move it. The second thing we could do is reduce our isolation. So if we sense that we're in stage 1, if we want to have some catalysts to move to stage 2, we can accept that we are loved people, that we have some self-worth. We can let go of some self-defeating spiritual thoughts and habits. Easier said than done, right? But it is this invitation that it's an invitation to love ourselves the way God loves us. An invitation to let go of the idea that we have to live up to perfection. This experience of God in our lives is really awe and grace and beauty and unconditional love. The second thing to help us move from stage 1 to stage 2 is to find a community to reduce our isolation so we don't feel like we're doing this all on our own. Okay. What questions do you have about stage 1. Or comments?
My comment would be, it's such a nice stage. It's too bad to ever have to leave. He's got it. All's good.
Yeah. Did you hear what Chris said? She said, her comment was, what a nice stage. It's too bad we have to leave. God's got it. It's all good. I think that's true, isn't it? Way in the back. Can you say it a little louder? Yes, we go in and out of the stages at times depending on what is happening. Thanks for saying that. As we go along this journey of faith and experience all these different stages, our home stage, the one we feel most comfortable in, might be stage 4. But then we have experiences of stage 1 because we've lived through it already. So we will go back to the stage and experience it all over again and get to feel that awe that this is beautiful. God does have the whole world in his hands. That kind of a feeling. And then we get back to the wall. So there is a sense of fluidity in these stages. It's hard if you're in a stage 4. We don't necessarily experience stage 5 or stage 6, and people who are in those stages may seem that we just don't get them. We really only move back to the ones we've already traveled through, but we can look ahead to what's coming and anticipate that and do some spiritual practices to help bring the catalyst. But thanks for saying that, because we do go back and forth in these stages. Yes? So she said, I wonder what it's like for people like me who have a big sense of faith, right, and want to wear it on your sleeve, but you hold back because it just doesn't, you don't want to pontificate. Yes, that is actually a characteristic, I think, of one of the stages that we just can't hold it back. We just want to share how great this experience of faith is. And if we have a community that we're a part of that is also a part of this stage of faith, we can't help but say, come and do this. How can you not want to live like this? So yes, that is a natural part of being a part, of a characteristic of the stages. And I'm not sure which one. Yes. Yeah. 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 So she's feeling the resistance of sometimes the charismatic leader cannot have our best interest at heart, might be a cult. And I think that's a really important thing to be aware of. Part of this, especially stage 1, is kind of an innocence and a vulnerability. That we're so overwhelmed, we're looking for someone to show us the way, and we can be susceptible to someone who is charismatic but may not be a healthy charismatic leader. So it is something to be aware of.
I'm just going to hold the mic for some.
Okay,
it's
great.
Extremely hard to hear over
Okay.
there, and we're missing good stuff.
So what came to my mind as you're talking about wearing your faith on your sleeve went back to one of the first statements that you said, of God being of grace, love, forgiveness, and not judgment. Because I think when you wear your faith on your sleeve, which a lot of us can do, it's easy to judge others because they don't feel the same way. And you're like, why not? What don't you get? And so I think that's a caution. And the other thing that came to my mind, talking about especially going through stage 1 and 2, is if anyone's gone through Alpha and watched people who came with little to no faith move into that sense of community and group, which I think is a critical part of that program. It's pretty awesome to be a part of that.
Yeah. Both of your comments are an awareness that I like about this stage theory is that it helps us see what's happening in our life of faith. So even to say, I'm super excited about my faith, and sometimes I'm judgmental about others who aren't there. That awareness is really helpful. It lets us know we're at a natural place. It also lets us know that other people are in different places. And there's nothing wrong with them, right? There's nothing wrong. If we're in stage 6 and someone else is in stage 1, there's nothing wrong with them. We're in a different place. So it allows us to be compassionate and patient with ourselves, but with the others. I think there's some great awareness that we're all in a different place in life on our journeys. The next observation you had about Alpha is so true. That when someone comes into the faith, gets involved in a community, is like, this is amazing. It's life-changing. And that is a great awareness of being able to observe these stages at work. That there's something to it. That when someone comes in and experiences an experience of God and community who also believe, it's super powerful and life-changing. Thank you for that. Okay, so one of the things that I like about this material is that it includes questions for reflection about how you have experienced life at this stage. So I'll leave that for you to do on your own if you're interested, or you could talk about it in your small groups. But I'd like to take 5 minutes, is that okay? Yeah. Okay. 5 minutes to lead you through this imaginative prayer that really is an experience of awe that the woman with the hemorrhage has when she's interacting with Jesus. So what I'm going to do as a group is read this story 2 or 3 times, depending on how it feels. And I want you to close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that, or just look down at the table and see if you can just put yourself in the story. And maybe you're a person in the group. Maybe you're just a bird that's sitting in the tree, like really just watching the humans interact. Maybe you're the woman who is talking with Jesus. But see where you are in the story. And after I read it a couple times, I'd like you just to jot down some notes and see if you can pay attention to how the story feels. So notice like what you hear in the group, what you see if you listen, and just what it feels like to be there. Okay? So this is from Mark chapter 5, and it's verses 25 through 34. So if you're comfortable, close your eyes or just look gently down in front of you and just notice how you feel as you observe this story and listen to it. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had. And she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, if I but touch his clothes, I will be made well. Immediately, her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately, aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Hear the story again and imagine yourself in it. And just notice how it feels. What is it like to be here? Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had. And she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." So take a few moments and just jot down some observations, what you noticed as you listened to that story. You might even notice, and you could talk about this in your small group, how do you see, what are some examples in this story of an experience of stage 1? So as you go from here, I invite you to talk about the questions and then reflect on what that prayer experience was like, listening to that story. Okay, I'll say one more prayer for us, and then we'll go our separate ways. Thank you, God, for the gift of awe, for our awareness of your presence and our neediness. And I pray and ask that you would heal us, help us get unstuck when we find ourselves in a cage. Thank you for people who accompany us along the way and provide community as we seek to grow in relationship and love with you. pray that you would be with all the small groups and give them a sense of joy and community together as they reflect on these questions. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.